Hey YouTube, Zach Guy here. Today I want to talk to you about the MC1 Aircrew survival knife. Now, to give a little history behind this, well, I'll go back. During World War II, it was realized that the aircrews needed a knife. Mainly the fighter pilots, they had a life raft and so on. And when they would bail out of their aircraft, they would get once they landed, they would get caught up in their parachute and have a hard time getting out of it. And the Air Force, by the Korean War, had decided, well, we'll issue a hunting knife to the air crews. The parachutes they were using at the time had one release on it, so you still had one shroud group that was still attached to the harness. And they were supposed to use the hunting knife to cut that away so they could get away from it, especially if they were in the water, get away from the parachute so they could get into their raft. Part of the problem was with the fixed blade, trying to cut their way out of the parachute. Sometimes they would end up puncturing either their inflatable life vest that they were wearing or their raft. And in many cases, when they ejected out of the fighter aircraft, they had a tendency to lose that sheath knife just from the force of the ejection, or it got caught on controls and whatnot and ripped off. They lost the knife more than they kept it. So the Air Force came up with a requirement for a pocket knife. They could be opened one-handed in case one hand was injured. Other good hand could still open the knife. And in around 1959-1960, they adopted the MC1 knife. And this particular one was made by Camulus. The original, it was based on the pattern of the M2 knife from World War II, which was a single blade. This is a dual blade knife. And the second blade is a shroud cutter. This was meant to be carried in a pocket on the inner thigh of the flight suit, so that with a lanyard attached to the bail, or clevis as some people call it, that was also attached to the flight suit, so you'd have better chance of retaining this during an ejection. And the lanyard was helped to pull this out of the pocket and would be in the open position like this. This was considered the master blade, the hook. And they could reach up behind their head with the hook and cut shroud lines as needed. And again, it was considered a safety feature to carry it this way. Now, once they got on the ground and they might need a blade to open something up or cut some more stuff, straps and such, they could then deploy the knife blade. Now, as you see with the shroud, with the bail being that far forward, it had a tendency to prevent the knife blade from opening all the way. So you had to, push it with your thumb. Now it's locked into position. You have a safety here that when the knife is closed, you'll have the safety forward, and then you push the safety forward again, and now the blade is locked open. And then to close it, push the blade. Another problem was, especially in the earlier models, people would forget to take the thumb off the button and the blade wouldn't fully lock open. You had to push it with your thumb. This particular one, a later model, doesn't really have that problem. Now, go over some of the specs on the knife real quick. It has a The clip point blade on it is 3 inches. Closed, it's 4 1/4 inches, and fully opened, it's 7 1/4 inches. It weighs in at 4 ounces. The blade steel is 420. Some of the earlier models that were made in the 60s, I believe, were made out of carbon steel. But the later, I'm not sure when they did it, they switched over to 420 HC stainless steel, which is what this knife has. And again, I got this in 1986. Now the pins on it that are holding the orange plastic handles are brass, and then the 2 pivot pins are stainless steel, and they have stainless steel washers on them. And again, you have your safety. If you have it pushed up like that, it won't open, and then when you have it pushed down, you can open it. And again, sometimes it just doesn't lock, so you need, a lot of times guys would, once it opened up, they would push on the base of the blade and lock it open. Push that up, and then your blade is, again, like I said, it is locked. This was not meant to be used as a utility knife or a primary survival knife. It was meant to be used in an emergency and in the pilot survival's vest. They would have the GI stainless steel pocket knife. This was, if they would have this, and possibly also the pilot survival knife, which was a fixed blade. But normally they would have this in their vest, and this is what they were expected to use, with this as a backup, or use them both. You know, it was the person's option. But they had that extra knife, but they would have this to use initially. Now, as I said, the MC1 has been standard issue to the US and NATO aircrews from around 1960 up until around 2000. In 1993, the Air Force canceled the contract with Camulus for the MC1, but they had enough left in stock that they continued issuing it until around 2000. Actually, they issued it till they ran out of them. In 2001, they started issuing a newer knife made by Colonial, the M724, and that's their designation. I'm not sure what the military's designation is on that new one, but it's a better made knife from what I understand, and can be used more as a primary survival knife. These knives, some places, some bases controlled them, and when you got to the base, you got issued the knife, and it had they engraved a serial number on it, and then when you left, you had to turn it in. I got issued this overseas when I was stationed in Japan. I was issued it, and because I was going to flight duties at my next base, I kept the knife, and when I retired, nobody ever asked for it back, so I kept it. But like I said, some bases controlled these, most did not. One of the really good things about this particular knife is that the leaf spring in here is very robust. This knife probably sat in a drawer in the closed like this 10 to 20 years that I didn't mess with it at all, and as you can see, the spring is still working fine. So that's one good thing, and again, it doesn't lock all the time, so you need to push up on the choil with your thumb to lock it, and then to make sure it'll stay locked open, you push your safety forward. Well, that's about it for the MC1 Aircrew Survival Knife. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And remember, always be prepared.